Don't watch this if you're alone right now, because some people who finished this video said something was still there after it ended, watching them. But you clicked anyway. Welcome to Everything Creepy Files. Now turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and don't look away. My name is Marisol Vega. I worked as a senior dispatcher for the Coltrane County Sheriff's Office in southeastern Arizona for 9 years and 4 months. And I'm going to tell you about the night deputy Hannah Reyes drove out on a routine patrol and never came back. Because the official report says one thing, but the recording I made on a personal device says something very different. And there's a 12-year-old girl out there who deserves to know the truth. Her name is Inez, and she deserves to know that her mother did not abandon her. She didn't run. She didn't quit. And she did not take her own life out in the desert, the way certain people in the department have quietly suggested. None of that is true. Her mother followed every single rule she had ever been trained to follow. Every protocol, every checklist, every step. And it still wasn't enough. So I need you to understand something. Right from the beginning, this wasn't Hannah's fault. It wasn't anyone's fault, because there are places and there are moments where fault doesn't really apply, where blame doesn't make sense, where the kind of questions we're used to asking don't have answers waiting on the other side. I'm going to tell you what I heard on the radio that night. I'm going to tell you what I've learned in the 19 months since. And I'm going to tell you what I saw the 3 times I went back out to County Road 11. What I heard on a handheld radio that wasn't even turned on. And what showed up on the dispatch system the night the location field updated to a place it should never under any circumstances have been able to update to. I'll tell you everything, but I'm going to take my time, because this isn't the kind of story you can rush. If you do, it stops making sense. And I've spent 1.5 years learning how to slow down just enough to notice the parts that matter. Before I get to that night, you need to understand who Hannah Reyes really was, because the news turned her into a statistic. The department turned her into a liability, and in a meeting I wasn't supposed to be in, her own union representative called her an unstable element. She wasn't, not even close. Hannah was 34 years old. She had a daughter, Inez, who was 10 at the time. And that kid had her mother's exact laugh, the kind that started low, then climbed higher, and then broke off suddenly, like it surprised even her. Hannah drank her coffee with 3 sugars every single time she'd apologize for it. Like somehow that much sugar was a personal failure. She'd laugh about it, but she never stopped apologizing. She'd been a sheriff's deputy for 6 years. Before that, she was a paramedic for 4. And before that, she was just a girl from Bisbee, 19 years old, joining the United States Army because her father had pancreatic cancer, and military insurance was the best chance they had. She did 1 tour in Afghanistan. She never talked about it, not really. The only thing she ever told me was this. She said the desert over there looked nothing like the desert back home, and she was grateful for that. She said the smell of creosote after rain, that was the smell of being home. That's who she was. Steady, that's the word. Steady. She was the kind of deputy you wanted on a domestic call, because she could talk a drunk man down, holding a kitchen knife, the same way someone else might coax a cat out of a tree. No panic. No drama, no improvisation. She followed procedure. Exactly. Not because she thought it was sacred, but because she had seen what happens when people start making things up as they go. She had been in places where improvisation got people killed. And somewhere along the way, she made a decision. She would rather be the boring deputy, the one who follows the rules. the one who comes home alive, than the brave one who doesn't. And I'm telling you all this because what you're about to hear is a woman who did everything right. Every single thing. And it still didn't save her. And that fact has never stopped meaning something to me. Coltrane County is the kind of place that does not exist in the imagination of most Americans. The population per square mile drops into single digits once you get past the interstate, and our patrol grid covered a stretch of high desert that ran from the foothills of the Chiricahua Mountains down to the New Mexico line. Most of our calls were livestock on the road, drunk drivers, the occasional domestic, and once or twice a season a body, usually a migrant who had run out of water somewhere in the Palancillo passes, sometimes a hiker who had underestimated the heat. Always sad, always quiet, always processed and filed and forgotten. We had 4 deputies on overnight rotation. Hannah was alone in her sector that night because Deputy Klein had called out sick with what he later admitted was a hangover, and the budget did not allow for a fill-in. That was normal. That was every Tuesday. That was the kind of staffing reality that small rural counties live with every single night, and most nights nothing happens, and the deputy drives her route and goes home, and the absence of resources does not become a story. The dispatch room at our substation was a small windowless space at the back of the building, painted a color the county called eggshell, and the rest of us called nicotine. There was a radio console, a computer with the CAD system, a landline phone, a fax machine that nobody had used in 3 years, and a small refrigerator with a handwritten note on it that said, "Please do not put fish in here," signed with 3 different names from 3 different decades. There was a coffee maker that produced something resembling coffee. There was a window into the bullpen that I usually kept the blinds open on, so I could see the deputies coming and going. There was, in the bottom drawer of my desk, a small black digital recorder that I had bought for myself 5 years earlier, originally to record voice memos for a creative writing class I was taking at the community college. Then forgotten about. Then started carrying again after a particularly ugly call where a deputy and I had remembered the same conversation in 2 completely different ways, and the official tape had not, somehow, captured the part that mattered. I am not going to claim I had a system. I'm going to tell you that I sometimes pulled the recorder out of the drawer and set it next to the radio when I had a feeling. And I am going to tell you that the feelings were almost never right, and that the recorder spent most of its life off, and that on the night of the 19th of October, for reasons I cannot fully explain, I turned it on. Hannah checked in with me at 22:47. Her voice was tired but warm, the way her voice always was at the start of a shift, before the coffee wore off and the night settled in. She said, "Dispatch. 14, 10-8 from the substation, heading east on County Road 11. I logged her. I told her to stay safe. She said always. Marai. She always called me Mari. Nobody else in the department did. It was a small thing. A personal thing. The kind of small personal thing that becomes important later. When you are trying to figure out which voice on the radio is real and which one is not. For the first hour of her shift, nothing happened. She ran a plate on a pickup truck parked outside the abandoned gas station at the Cottonwood Junction, and the plate came back clean, registered to a rancher named Delmer Hoyt, who lived 18 miles north, and who had a habit of leaving his work truck at that gas station. When he went out drinking with his cousin in Lordsburg, she drove on. She checked in at every waypoint, the way she always did, even though half the deputies on the overnight shift did not bother with waypoints anymore. The way you stop bothering with anything once you have done it enough times. At 012, she radioed in to say she was turning south on the access road that ran along the eastern edge of the old McKinnon Ranch. That road is 41 miles of nothing. It is not paved. It dead ends at a wash that floods in monsoon season and dries to cracked clay the rest of the year. There is no reason to patrol it except that the route map says you have to, and Hannah followed the route map, because Hannah followed the route map. At 034, she radioed in again. Her voice was different, not afraid, just careful. The way her voice got when she was assessing something. She said, "Dispatch, 14. I am seeing lights on the McKinnon property, east structure. Be advised, that property has been condemned since '09. I pulled the file on the McKinnon Ranch. I had pulled it before, years earlier for an unrelated reason I could not now remember. And I remembered the basics. The main house had burned in 2009 in a fire that was officially ruled accidental, but that everyone in the department privately believed was insurance arson, except that the insurance had never paid out, and the family had never returned to claim the land. The property had been tied up in some kind of probate dispute for over a decade. The McKinnons themselves had scattered, some to Phoenix, some to Las Cruces, one to a federal facility in Florence, on a charge unrelated to the fire. Nobody lived there. Nobody was supposed to be there. There was no power on the property. There had been no power on the property since 2010, when the utility company had come out and physically removed the meter after 18 months of unpaid bills. I told Hannah to hold position and wait for backup. I started calling the other units. Deputy Aguilar was on the far side of the county, dealing with a rollover on the interstate that had turned into a hazmat situation, because the truck had been carrying agricultural chemicals. Deputy Brennan was closer, maybe 25 minutes out, but he was finishing up the booking on a due-eye at the substation, and he could not just walk away from a process suspect without supervision. The sergeant on call, Sergeant Whitman, was not answering his phone. He was not answering his phone for reasons that would later come out in an internal review, reasons involving a girlfriend in Las Cruces and a personal cell that he had turned off. But at the moment, all I knew was that the sergeant was not answering and that backup was, at best, 25 minutes away. I told Hannah backup was 25 minutes minimum. She said, "Copy. I will observe from the road. That was the protocol. That was the right call. Observe from a safe distance. Document. Wait for backup. Do not approach a potentially occupied condemned structure alone in the dark, on a property with no clear ownership and no electrical service." She did everything right. I want to say that again. She did everything right. The story I am about to tell you is not a story about a deputy who made a mistake. It is a story about a deputy who made every correct decision available to her, in the correct order, with the correct timing, and the correct decisions were not enough. I need you to hold on to that as you listen, because there is a kind of horror story where the protagonist makes bad choices and pays for them, and people listen to those stories and feel, somewhere underneath, that they would have made better choices, and they sleep fine. This is not that kind of story. This is the other kind. At 041, she radioed again. She said, "Dispatch, the lights are moving." I asked her to clarify. She said, "They are moving across the property. Not vehicle lights, not flashlights, something else. They are sort of drifting, low to the ground, maybe 2 feet off the dirt. There are 3 of them, no, 4 lights. They are white. They do not flicker." I asked her if there was any chance it was someone with a lantern. She said, "A lantern swings. A lantern bobs when a person walks. These are not bobbing. They are gliding. The motion is too smooth, and there is no person attached to them. I have my binoculars on them. There is just dark behind each light. The lights are not attached to anything I can see." I told her to stay in the cruiser. She said, "I am in the cruiser." I told her backup was 19 minutes out. She said, "Copy." There was a long silence on the radio, about 4 minutes. I want you to imagine 4 minutes of silence on a radio when you are the dispatcher and a deputy you have known for 6 years is sitting in a cruiser on a dirt road, 41 miles from the nearest other human being, watching 4 lights that do not have sources drift across a condemned property at 1 in the morning. 4 minutes is a long time. 4 minutes is enough time to call your husband, which I did not do because we are not allowed to use personal phones during a live call. 4 minutes is enough time to think about every other deputy you have lost, which I did because I had lost 2 over the years. 1 to a traffic stop that went bad, 1 to a heart attack in his own driveway, after a double shift. 4 minutes is enough time to reach into the bottom drawer of your desk and pull out a small black digital recorder that you had not used in 8 months and turn it on and set it carefully next to the radio console with the microphone pointed at the speaker. Which is what I did, and which I cannot, to this day, explain. Then she came back on. and her voice had changed again. It was lower, the voice she used on domestic calls when she was talking someone down off the edge of a bad decision. The voice that meant she had assessed the situation and concluded that the situation was worse than she had initially thought. She said, "Dispatch, I need you to listen carefully. The lights have stopped moving. They are arranged in a line about 30 yards from the road. They are facing me. I cannot tell if there is anyone holding them or if they are just floating. I do not have a clear visual. My headlights are not reaching them. I am going to put my high beams on." I heard the click of the high beam switch through her open mic. The high beams on a sheriff's cruiser are not subtle. They are designed to light up an entire dark highway. They are designed to make a deer freeze at 300 yards, she said. Mari, that is when I knew something was wrong, because she did not use my name on an open channel. Ever. The use of personal names on dispatch frequencies is technically against department policy, and Hannah was not the kind of deputy who broke policy casually. The fact that she said my name meant she was trying to tell me something the policy could not capture. The fact that she said it the way she said it, low and careful, and without any of her usual warmth, meant whatever she was trying to tell me was not a thing she could put into the official words. She said, "Marai, my high beams are not working." I told her to try them again. She said, "I am trying them. The switch is on. The dash light says they are on. There is no light coming out of the front of the car." I asked her to confirm her headlights were on at all. She said, "My headlights are on. I can see them lighting up the dust in front of the bumper. The low beams are working. But the high beams, there is no extra light. It is like the beam is just stopping. Like there is something in front of the car eating it." I told her to back up, to reverse. "To get out of there," she said. "Copy. Reversing now." I heard the cruiser shift into gear. I heard the engine work. The Crown Victoria has a particular sound when it shifts into reverse. A small mechanical clunk followed by the slightly different pitch of the engine adjusting to the new gear. And I had heard that sound 1,000 times through her open mic over the years. I heard it that night. I heard it correctly. The car shifted into reverse. The engine adjusted. The wheels began to turn. I could hear the crunch of dirt under the tires. Then I heard her say, very quietly, "It is not moving." I asked her to repeat. She said, The car is in reverse. The wheels are turning. I can hear them turning. I can feel them turning. I can feel the vibration through the seat. But the car is not moving, Mari. The dust outside the window is not moving. The lights, the 4 lights, they are the same distance away. 30 yards. They have not gotten any farther. I have been reversing for 10 seconds. I told her to put the car in park. I heard the gear shift again. The wheels stopped turning. I heard her sit very still for a moment. She said, "The lights are closer." I asked her how much closer. She said, "About 10 yards. They moved while I was talking to you." I did not see them move. I blinked and they were closer. I told her backup was 15 minutes out. She said, "I do not think I have 15 minutes. I want to pause the story here because this is the moment I have gone back to in my head more than any other. This is the moment where I think, if I could go back, if I could rewrite anything about that night, I would have told her something different than what I told her. I do not know what I would have told her. I have run through every possible alternative in my head, and none of them seem like they would have helped. But this is the moment. This is the moment where her situation became survivable, and then was not survivable. And the line between those two states was somewhere in the 4 or 5 seconds, after she said she did not have 15 minutes. Whatever I should have said, I did not say it. I said the thing I had been trained to say. I said, "Stay calm. Stay in the vehicle, backup is coming." She said, "Copy." She said, "I'm going to describe what I am seeing. I want this on the record." I told her to go ahead. She said, "There are 4 lights. They are white. They are about the size of a softball. They are roughly 2 feet off the ground. They are arranged in a horizontal line, equally spaced, about 3 feet apart from each other. There is no source. I can see all the way around each light. There is no flashlight, no lantern, no person holding them. They are just suspended. The air around them is not glowing. They are not illuminating the ground beneath them. They are producing light, but the light is not going anywhere. The light is staying in the lights, she said. There is something behind the lights. I asked her to clarify. She said, I cannot see it clearly. The lights are bright enough that they are making a kind of silhouette problem, but there is a shape behind them. It is tall. It is taller than a person. It is standing very still. I think the lights might be attached to it. I think the lights might be part of it. I told her, again, to stay in the vehicle. She said, Mari, my radio is the only thing in this car that is still working. I asked her to repeat. She said, the engine just stopped. The dashboard is dark. The headlights are off. The interior lights are off. The radio is the only thing still on. And the radio should not be on because the radio runs off the same battery as everything else. I know my own car. Mari, I know how the electrical system works. If the battery is dead, the radio is not dead. The radio is getting power from somewhere else. I want you to understand the position I was in. I was sitting in a dispatch room 210 miles from her location. I had no vehicle. I had no authority to leave my post. I had 2 other deputies in the field, both still too far away to reach her. I had a sergeant on call who was not answering his phone. I had a radio and a recording device, and a woman I had known for 6 years telling me that the laws of electrical engineering had stopped applying to her car. I had a procedure manual in the bottom drawer of my desk that did not have a chapter for this. I had no one to call who would have believed me if I had called them. I had, in the end, exactly one tool, which was my voice, and I used it. I told her I loved her. I told her Anise was safe at home with her sister Camila, and that Anise was going to see her in the morning. I told her to keep talking to me. I told her backup was 12 minutes out. I told her my husband had asked me, that morning, what I wanted for my birthday next month, and I had not been able to think of anything. And now I was going to tell him I wanted her to come home from this shift. I said stupid things. I said the things you say when you have run out of professional things to say, and the only words left are the ones you would say to a person you loved if you knew you were never going to see them again. I have replayed those words. I do not regret them. I do not think they helped. But I do not think they hurt. And I think she needed to hear them. And I think I needed to say them. And I am not going to apologize for any of it. She said, Mari, I want you to know I am not going to open the door. I said, good, do not. She said, but I want you to know that if I do open the door, it will not be me opening it. I did not know what to say to that. She said, I can feel something pulling at the edge of my thinking. It is not a voice. It is not words. It is like there is a question being asked. And the question is whether I want to come closer. And I keep saying no. But the question keeps coming back. And each time it comes back, it is a little bit louder. And a little bit more like my own voice. It is starting to sound like a thought I am having. It is starting to sound like something I would naturally want to. I am telling you this because I want you to know, on the record, that I do not naturally want to do this. I do not want to get out of this car. If I get out of this car, it will be because something has convinced me that I want to. And the convincing will not have come from inside me. I told her to focus on me. I told her to describe the inside of the cruiser. I told her to name 5 objects she could see. The way you do with someone having a panic attack. The way you ground them in the physical world. She said, steering wheel. Radio, my coffee cup. The photo of Anise on the dashboard. The shotgun in the rack. I told her to keep her hands on the steering wheel. She said, I am. There was another long pause. I could hear her breathing. I could hear the small mechanical sounds of the cruiser at rest, the ticking of the cooling engine, the very faint creak of the seat as she shifted her weight. I could not hear anything outside the car. No wind. No insects. No coyotes. The Sonoran Desert at night is loud, and there was nothing on the tape, and I did not notice that at the time. And I noticed it later when I played the recording back at home through good headphones. And once you notice it, you cannot stop noticing it. The world outside her cruiser had gone silent. The world inside her cruiser was the only world that was still making sound. Then she said, very calmly, "Mari, the lights are at the window." I asked her to repeat. She said, "The 4 lights. They're at the driver's side window. They are about 6 inches from the glass. I can see them very clearly now. They are not lights. They are eyes." I asked her to clarify. She said, "They are eyes. They are arranged in a vertical line, not horizontal. I was wrong before. They are stacked one above the other. The lowest one is at the level of my chest. The highest one is above the roof of the car. They are not blinking. They do not have pupils. They are just white. They are looking at me. They are all looking at me. Each one individually is looking at me. They are not looking in the same direction. Each one is tracking me separately." I told her to close her eyes. She said, "I cannot." I asked her why. She said, "Because if I close my eyes, I will not know if it gets in." The next 40 seconds of the tape are silent, not empty silent. There is a low breathing tone underneath, and there is the sound of Hannah's own breathing, very shallow and very fast. There is no other sound, no wind, no engine, no insects. There is just her, and the breathing underneath, and the absence of everything else. I want to say something about that breathing tone, because it is the part of the recording that no one I have played it for has been able to dismiss. The tone is not on the radio in real time. I did not hear it that night. I only heard it later, when I played the recording back at home, through good headphones, lying on the floor of my office with the lights off, the way you have to listen to certain things. It is a low, steady tone. Almost too low to register. It runs underneath everything she says, and it gets louder as the call goes on. It is not radio interference. I have had it analyzed. I paid a man in Tucson $300 to analyze it, and he told me it was not interference, and not equipment noise, and not any sound he had been able to find a match for in any database he had access to. And he gave me my money back, and asked me not to bring him anything else. It sounds, if I am being honest with you, like something breathing. The breaths are too long. Each one lasts about 11 seconds. I time them. 11 seconds in, 11 seconds out. The interval is consistent throughout the entire recording. It does not speed up. It does not slow down. Whatever was breathing on its own schedule, and Hannah's voice and my voice were happening on top of that schedule, and whatever it was not in any hurry. She said, "Mari, I am going to do something, and I need you to log it as my decision." I asked her what she was going to do. She said, "I'm going to ask it what it wants." I told her not to. She said, "I have to. Backup is not coming in time. The doors are going to open whether I want them to or not. I can feel them wanting to open. I can feel the locks wanting to disengage. If I ask the question first, maybe I get to choose the answer. Maybe whatever this is, it has rules. Everything has rules. I've been a cop long enough to know that everything has rules. Even the things that do not look like have rules. I am going to find out what the rules are. I want to say something here because this is the part that I think about most. Hannah was not a woman who believed in negotiating with the irrational. She was not superstitious. She did not read tarot cards or watch ghost shows. She was a Catholic in the cultural sense, the way most of us out here are Catholic, which is to say she crossed herself when she passed a roadside cross and otherwise kept her metaphysics to herself. When she said she was going to ask it what it wanted, she was not making a spiritual decision. She was making a tactical one. She had identified an entity. She had assessed her options. She had concluded that engagement was lower risk than waiting. That is what her training told her to do. And that is what she did. And I will never know if she was right or if she was already being moved. Gently, and from somewhere behind her own thoughts, toward the decision the thing outside the window wanted her to make. She rolled down the driver's side window. I heard the motor of the window. I heard it descend. I heard the click when it reached the bottom of its track. And then I heard her voice, level and professional, the voice she used on traffic stops, the voice that did not let any fear into it, the voice she had spent 6 years building. She said, "I am Deputy Hannah Reyes of the Coltrane County Sheriff's Office. I am alone. I am unarmed at this moment. I would like to know what you want." The silence that followed lasted 19 seconds. I counted. I was counting everything by then. I had a notepad on my desk and I was making tally marks and writing down timestamps because I had decided somewhere underneath the part of my mind that was still trying to be a professional dispatcher that this was going to be a record, and the record was going to need to be precise. Then a voice answered her. I have to be careful how I describe this voice because every time I try to describe it, I end up using words that do not fit. The voice was not loud. It was not deep. It was not raspy or distorted or layered. It sounded, more than anything else, like a voice that had learned how to be a voice by listening to a lot of voices and assembling one from the average. It sounded correct in every individual feature and wrong as a whole. It sounded like a voice you would hear if you were dreaming. You were listening to a voice and could not in the dream. Remember what voices actually sounded like? There was nothing wrong with any single part of it. There was something wrong with the whole. The voice said, "Stay." That was the entire word. Hannah said, "Stay where?" The voice said, "I understand the request. Can you clarify?" The voice said, "Stay. The road ends. Stay. I want to point out something I noticed only later." There was no static during the voice. The radio, which had been carrying a faint background hiss the entire call, went absolutely clean during the moments the voice was speaking, as if something was filtering the channel, as if something was using the radio as a clean conduit and did not want any other signal contaminating it. The hiss came back the moment the voice stopped. It was always there, except when the voice was speaking, and when the voice was speaking, it was the only sound on the channel. Hannah said, "I am going to leave now. I am going to start my engine, and I am going to drive away. I am not staying." The voice said, "You are already staying." Hannah said, "What does that mean?" The voice said, "The road ends here. You are at the end of the road. There is no further road. You are at the place. You stay at the place. The place is where you are. You are at it. You stay." I have transcribed those sentences exactly as they appear on the tape. I have listened to them perhaps 400 times. I am still not sure whether the entity was failing to use English correctly, or whether it was using English perfectly to describe a situation that English is not equipped to describe. There is a third possibility I do not like to think about, which is that the sentences were not intended to be understood at all, and that the words were a kind of ritual recitation, and that the meaning was something other than the meaning of the words, and that it was working on Hannah at a level her conscious mind could not access. I do not know which of these is true. I do not think any of them are good news, Hannah said. I am going to start the engine. The voice did not respond. I heard her turn the key. I heard the engine catch on the second try. I heard the dashboard come back on. She described it as it happened in the same flat professional voice. Every gauge lighting up, the headlights returning, the radio's hiss coming back, the interior lights flickering on, the small reassuring chime of the seatbelt warning. I heard her shift into drive. I heard the tires move. I heard her say, "I am moving. I am moving. I am on the road. I am heading north. Mari, I am heading north." She drove for 11 minutes. She talked the whole time. She described the landmarks she was passing, which I want to record here because they were the right landmarks, in the right order. On the right road, she passed the rusted cattle guard at the property line of the old McKinnon Ranch. She passed the wooden marker that someone had carved with the initials JM, decades earlier, that the locals all knew meant Joseph McKinnon, the patriarch who had bought the land in 1947. She passed the dry creek bed where a flash flood had taken out the bridge in 2013 and where the county had finally put in a new culvert in 2016. She passed the cluster of dead mesquite trees that everyone called the Three Brothers, even though there were 4 of them because the 4th one had died most recently, and nobody had updated the name. She named all of these. She read the mile markers out loud every minute. She was leaving a record. She was being a witness to her own location, in case the location turned out not to be what it appeared to be. And she was right to do that. And I want the record to show that she was right. At minute 12, she stopped talking for a moment. Then she said, "Mari, the mile markers are wrong." I asked her to clarify. She said, "I just passed mile marker 31. 2 minutes ago, I passed mile marker 33. 2 minutes before that, I passed mile marker 35. The numbers are going down. I am heading north. The numbers should be going up." I told her to turn around. She said, "I am not going to turn around. The numbers going down means I am getting closer to the substation. The substation is at mile 0. If I keep driving, I will reach it." I told her the numbering did not work that way. The county road numbering started at mile 0 at the southern terminus, not the northern. If she was heading north and the numbers were decreasing, she was heading the wrong way, or the markers had been moved, or something else was going on that I could not put words to. She was silent for a long moment. Then she said, "Or I am not actually heading north." I told her to check her compass. She said, "My compass says north. The stars say north. I can see Polaris through the windshield, just to the right of center. The road I am on is the road I was on. I have not turned. I have not deviated. But the mile markers are counting down." I told her to stop the car. She said, "I'm not going to stop the car." I asked her why. She said, "Because if I stop, I think I will be back at the McKinnon Ranch." She drove for another 6 minutes. Mile marker 25, 23, 21. She read each one. Her voice was getting tighter. Not panicked, just compressed, the way a voice gets when a person is rationing their composure, the way you talk when you have decided that you only have a certain amount of calm left, and you are going to spend it carefully. At mile marker 19, she said, "Mari, there's a vehicle ahead of me on the road." I asked her to describe it. She said, "It is a sheriff's cruiser. Coltrane County. The lights are off. It is parked on the shoulder. The driver's side door is open." I asked her for the unit number. She said, "I can see the number on the trunk. It is Unit 14. There was a long pause. She said, "Mari, Unit 14 is me. I am in Unit 14. I told her to keep driving, to not stop, to go around the parked vehicle and keep going. She said, "I am going to stop." I told her not to. She said, "I have to. There is something on the ground next to the open door." I asked her what. She said, "It is a person. There is a deputy on the ground." She stopped the car. I heard the brakes. I heard her shift to park. I heard her open her door. I heard the small chime that the cruiser makes when the door is open and the keys are still in the ignition. I heard her boots on the gravel of the shoulder. I told her to get back in the cruiser. I told her this was not a real situation. I told her that whatever she was seeing was the same thing that had spoken to her on the road, and that it had moved itself in front of her, and that she could not engage with it. I said all of these things very quickly, the way you say things when you know you are running out of time. And I am not sure how much of it she heard, because she did not respond to any of it directly. She said, "Mari, I have to check. I have to. It looks like me." I heard her footsteps on the dirt. I heard her approach the other vehicle. I heard her say, very quietly, "Oh." I asked her what she saw. She said, "It is me. It is me on the ground. She is wearing my uniform. She has my badge. Her face is my face. She is not breathing. She is on her side. Her left arm is underneath her. Her right arm is extended. There is a coffee stain on the front of her uniform that I got on my shirt 3 days ago when I spilled my thermos getting out of the car at the substation. The stain is identical. It is in exactly the same place. The shape is exactly the same. Mari, I have the same stain right now." "It is the same stain." I asked her to step back. She said, "Mari, she has the radio in her hand. The radio is on. I can hear you in her radio. Your voice is coming out of the radio in her hand. She has been listening to us the whole time. She has been here the whole time. I told her to go back to her cruiser. She said, Mari, I do not know which one is mine. I asked her to repeat. She said, there are 2 cruisers. They are both Unit 14. They are identical. The dust on the tires is the same. The coffee cup in the cup holder is the same. The photo of Inez on the dashboard is the same. The wear pattern on the steering wheel is the same. I do not know which one I came from. I do not know which one I was driving. I have been standing here for 30 seconds and I cannot remember which door I opened. I told her to pick one and get in and drive. She said, if I pick the wrong one, I think I will be the one on the ground. The next part of the tape is the part I have never played for anyone, not for my husband, not for the lawyer who tried to help me file a complaint, not for the 2 former colleagues I have played the rest of the recording for. Some of it is private, in the way grief is private, in the way a person's last words are private when those last words are not spoken to anyone but the people who love them. I am going to summarize it instead of transcribing it. I think Hannah would prefer that. She talked to me for another 4 minutes. She talked about Inez. She talked about her sister Camila, and the things she wanted Camila to know, and the things she wanted Camila not to tell Inez. She talked about a vacation she had taken to the coast at Rocky Point when she was 19, the summer before the army, with 2 girlfriends and a cooler full of bad beer and an old Honda that broke down on the way home. She talked about a dog she had as a child, a brown mutt named Pancho, who had slept on the foot of her bed every night for 11 years and who had died when she was 16, and about how she had never gotten another dog because she had not wanted to find out whether she would love a second one as much as the first one, and she did not want the first one to know somewhere that she had replaced him. She was not panicking. She was saying goodbye. She knew what was happening. She was leaving me a record of who she was in case the woman who got back in the cruiser was not her. At the end of the 4 minutes, she said, Mari, I am going to make a choice. I'm going to get into the cruiser on the left. I'm choosing the left one. I want this on the record. The left one. Do you copy? I told her I copied. She said, if I come back and I am not me, I want you to know it was not me who came back. The me that is me is going into the left cruiser. Whatever drives away from here, if it is not the left cruiser, it is not me. Even if it sounds like me, even if it knows things only I would know. If it is not in the left cruiser, it is not me. Promise me you will remember. I promised her. I heard a door open. I heard a door close. I heard an engine start. The radio went silent for 8 seconds. Then a voice came over the radio. The voice said, Dispatch, 14, 10-8 from the McKinnon Access Road, returning to substation. The voice was Hannah's voice. It was identical to her voice. Every inflection, every slight catch in the throat, every cadence I had memorized over 6 years of overnight shifts, the same warmth at the edges, the same small dropping of the final consonant on the word substation, the same faint sonoran drawl underneath the professional cadence. But it was wrong. I cannot tell you how I knew. I can tell you that I knew the moment I heard it. There was something in the voice that was correct in the way the entity's voice had been correct, which is to say it was constructed correctly out of all the right components, and was not, underneath, a real voice. It sounded like Hannah. It did not sound like Hannah was speaking. It sounded, if I am being precise, like a recording of Hannah's voice that had been disassembled into individual phonemes, and then reassembled, perfectly, by something that understood the rules of phoneme assembly, but had never actually had a body, and had never actually pushed air through a throat, and had never actually meant any of the words it was saying. I did not respond. The voice said, Dispatch, 14. Do you copy? I did not respond. The voice said, Mari, do you copy? Mari. She had only ever called me Mari twice on an open channel that night. She had used my name as a signal that something was wrong. The thing in the radio had heard her do it, and it was using the same trick, and it was using it incorrectly, because she would not have used it as a casual address. She would have used it to warn me. The thing in the radio was using my name to reassure me. That was the wrong use. That was the use a thing would make of the name if it had heard the name being used, and had concluded that the name was a tool for making me listen, without understanding that the tool only worked when the situation it was attached to was already wrong. I picked up the digital recorder from beside the radio. I pressed stop. I put it in my pocket. Then I pressed the transmit button on the dispatch console and I said, Unit 14, dispatch, confirm your location with Cross Street. There was a long pause. The voice said, dispatch. 14, I am on County Road 11. I said, Unit 14, what is your odometer reading? The voice said, I do not have a current reading. I said, Unit 14, what is the name of your daughter? The pause that followed was 11 seconds long, the same length as the breaths underneath the call. I did not realize that until I went back and timed it later, and when I realized it, I had to put the headphones down and walk outside and stand in the yard for a while, because the pattern was the same pattern, and the pattern meant something, and I did not want it to mean what I knew it meant. The voice said, dispatch, please repeat. I said, the voice said, dispatch. That information is not relevant to my current status. I said, Unit 14, you are not authorized to return to substation. Hold position. Backup is en route. The voice did not respond. I called Deputy Brennan on a separate channel. I told him not to engage with Unit 14 if he encountered it. I told him to call for additional backup, to approach the McKinnon Access Road with extreme caution, and to consider the cruiser hostile. He thought I was having a breakdown. He told me later, much later after a couple of beers in his garage, that he had thought I was having a breakdown. He said he had wondered, in the moment, whether I had been hitting the bottle on shift, which was something I had never done in 9 years, and which he knew I had never done, and which he was ashamed of having considered. But he had listened to me, because we had worked together for 9 years, and he trusted me, and he did what I asked. And he saved his own life by doing it, although neither of us knew it at the time. When Brennan and Aguilar reached the McKinnon Access Road 40 minutes later, they found nothing, no cruiser, no body, no tire tracks beyond what would be expected from a single vehicle entering and not leaving, which is to say, they found Hannah's tire tracks going in, and no tracks coming out, and no second set of tracks at all. Whatever else had been on that road that night, it had not left tire tracks. They found Hannah's coffee cup on the side of the road, the metal travel mug she had carried for years, dented on one side from the time she had dropped it at a traffic stop, and they recognized it instantly. They found her photo of Inez, the small laminated one she kept on the dashboard, lying face up in the dirt as if it had been placed there carefully. The corner squared to no particular reference, but somehow carefully squared anyway. They did not find Hannah. They did not find Unit 14. They did not find the second cruiser. They did not find any indication that there had ever been a second cruiser. The road was empty. The desert was silent. The sun came up over the Chiricahuas, and the night was over, and a deputy was gone. The investigation that followed was the worst thing I have ever participated in. And I have participated in some bad things over the course of my career. The official position of the department, arrived at within 72 hours, was that Deputy Reyes had experienced some form of mental health crisis on the night of the 19th of October, possibly triggered by the isolation of her sector and possibly exacerbated by undiagnosed PTSD from her military service, and had abandoned her vehicle and walked off into the desert, where she had either died of exposure or had successfully disappeared. The cruiser, the official report stated, had been stolen by an unknown third party at some point in the hours following her departure, and the absence of tire tracks was explained by an unspecified theory involving the wind. I am not making this up. The phrase used in the report was atmospheric conditions consistent with surface track erasure. I read the report twice. I asked in writing, what kind of atmospheric conditions could erase tracks, but not the photograph of a child laid carefully on the dirt 3 feet from where the tracks would have been? I received, instead, a meeting with the sheriff and the union representative and the human resources coordinator, in which it was suggested to me, very gently, that my own mental health might benefit from a leave of absence. I took the leave, I came back 6 weeks later. Nothing had been resolved. Nothing was going to be resolved. The cruiser was listed as stolen and unrecovered. Hannah was listed as a missing person, and her status was being reviewed for reclassification as a presumed deceased after the standard waiting period. Inez was living with her Aunt Camila in a town 3 hours away, and she was not, at that time, asking many questions, and the adults in her life were grateful for that, because none of them had any answers. But the system, which is the part of this story I have not yet finished telling you, the system did not agree with the official report. The system, which is the dispatch software that we use to log every unit status, did not show Unit 14 as stolen. It did not show Unit 14 as missing. It showed Unit 14 as on patrol. It still does. It has shown Unit 14 as on patrol every single night for the last 19 months, and the status field reads pending, and the location field updates briefly every night at 2247 to coordinates on the McKinnon Access Road, and then the location field goes blank, and the system carries on as if nothing had happened. I know this because I still have access to the system. I should not. I was placed on administrative leave 6 weeks after the incident. The second leave, the one that turned into a quiet termination, and the official reason given in my final paperwork, was that I had failed to follow protocol on the night in question by not immediately escalating to the sergeant on duty. The fact that the sergeant on duty had not been answering his phone was not addressed in the paperwork. The fact that my failure to escalate had been a 1-minute delay in a situation where the sergeant had been incommunicado for over an hour was not addressed. The real reason I was let go, the reason that nobody put in writing, was that I would not stop asking questions. I would not stop filing reports. I would not stop demanding that someone explain to me why the vehicle log showed an entry timestamp and no exit timestamp, and why nobody else seemed to find this strange, and why every time I brought it up to my supervisor, his eyes would do a small thing, a small flickering thing, as if he were hearing me in a language he did not quite speak. I kept my access because the IT department forgot to revoke it. There is no conspiracy. There is just a small county sheriff's office with an underfunded contractor and a former dispatcher who knows the system better than anyone currently employed there. I check the log every night. I have checked the log every night. For 19 months. The pending status updates at 2247. The location field briefly shows the McKinnon Access Road. Then it goes blank. The system has done this every single night without exception, including the nights when I have been traveling, including the nights when I have been sick, including the night last December when I was in the hospital for a small surgery and was logged in from my phone with one hand and an IV in the other. The pattern does not break. The pattern is more reliable than the sunrise. The pattern is, at this point, the most reliable thing in my life. I have driven out to the McKinnon Access Road 3 times in the 19 months since. The first time was 8 months after the incident. I went in the afternoon, in daylight, with my husband Adden in the passenger seat, and a thermos of coffee, and a sense of grim determination, and a small voice recorder I had thought I might use to capture some kind of evidence, and it ended up not turning on, because the act of turning it on felt, in the moment, like a small surrender to a category of thinking I was not yet ready to surrender to. We drove the length of the access road. We saw the burned-out shell of the McKinnon Ranch house. The walls collapsed inward, the roof completely gone. The kitchen still recognizable as a kitchen by the rusted shape of an old cast-iron stove. We saw the dry wash at the southern terminus, the cracked clay pattern unbroken by any sign of human activity. We saw nothing unusual. We turned around and drove back. The mile markers count.